I'm honored to be invited by Dar al-Hikmah, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them tawfiq in all of their endeavors and to increase them and reward them for all that they have done to spread this beautiful religion. And it's a reminder to me that no matter what's going on in the world with the people that are trying to blow out the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah is mutimmu nurihi, walau kariha al-kafirun. That Allah is completing His light no matter what the kafirun feel or believe. And so it's also should be some solace gained by us to remind us to continue working for this deen and to spread this beautiful religion no matter what's going on in the world. We know that the hadith says that if the day of judgment, the qiyamah, which is worse than any bill that they can pass in the White House, the qiyamah, if it comes and in your hand is a fasila, a young date palm tree, then continue planting it. So keep doing the work no matter what's going on in the world. So just in the 10 minutes or so that I have to speak about in the first portion, I just wanted to have us contextualize prison da'wah or prison outreach through the light of the Quran and Sunnah. So in the first, in a description of the believers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran in chapter 78, 76, ayah 8. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ويطعمون الطعام على حبه مسكينا ويتيما وأسيرا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and they feed, describing the believers, for the love of Allah, the poor, the miskin, the yatim, the orphan, and the asir, the prisoner. Now most people have had the opportunity to feed the poor and to feed the miskin, to feed the poor and to feed the yatim, the orphan. But how many of us have had the opportunity to feed a prisoner? And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying the description of us, the believers, is that we feed the prisoner, in addition to the poor and the orphan. And Imam al-Qurtubi says that Qatada, rahmatullahi alayhi, narrates that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent this ayah as an instruction for the people of Badr. That when they took these prisoners, these people that had come to kill the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and to kill the Sahaba, now the Muslims have these people in their hands, these prisoners. Allah is saying, feed them. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam ordered that the people do ikram to these prisoners. And he used to have these prisoners and say 2 or 3 prisoners to this Sahabi. And he would take them and do ikram to him, honor him, so much so that he would begin by giving him food, giving the prisoner food, before he feeds himself. And this was the way that the Prophet ﷺ was teaching the Sahaba. This is important to remember because this ayah includes the Muslim prisoners. But it specifically was revealed about the mushrikeen that were taken in the Battle of Badr. So just think about that. Think about the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ordering us to take care of these people that were out to kill us, that were out to harm us. And now that you have control of them, take care of them. So remember the spirit of mercy. Now if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us to take care of the non-Muslim prisoner, then what do we think about our Muslim brothers and sisters that are imprisoned? What's the importance that we have that's placed upon us to take care of our Muslim brothers and sisters? Because care of the Muslims is given a priority over care of the non-Muslims. But not to detract from the care of our non-Muslim brothers and sisters in humanity. But our first priority is our family. Just like in the family structure, you have to take care of yourself and your spouse and your children before you go out and do community work. And a lot of people, they don't have this concept down. They're working on the communities, but they're forgetting the ayah, قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِكُمْ نَارًا. Allah says, protect yourselves and your family from the fire. And so we have to protect our families first before we go out. So we do have to take care of the non-Muslim prisoners, but we have more of a right to take care of our Muslim brothers and sisters that are in prison. The other thing about this feeding, the ayah says, وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامِ, that they give food. One of the understandings of this is the physical nourishment, because everybody needs food. But the ulama of tafsir have also said that this food is not just physical food. It's any type of benefit that you can give to these people. The miskeen and the yatim and the asir. And so sometimes spiritual nourishment, or actually all the time, spiritual nourishment is more important than physical nourishment. So if you have a chance to meet somebody that's hungry and that has not received the message of Islam, and you can only give them one of two things. You can either give them some food or you give them La ilaha illallah. And that's somebody just saying, you have a choice. That's a hypothetical situation. But if you were in that, you give them the tawheed first. Because that spiritual nourishment is something that they need more, and that they're in more of iftiqar towards, they're more of need of that, more than that physical food. But the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen the word ta'am, according to the ulama of tafsir, is that humanity, regardless of their religious beliefs, they all recognize that we need to eat to survive. Not everybody recognizes that we need La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah. We need the shahada, we need tawheed for our spiritual heart, for our heart to survive. Most people don't recognize that. But everybody recognizes that we need food. And one of the shuyukh in Mauritania that I studied with, he's an amazing hafiz of the Quran. His name is Muhammad Ali, and he's also the mu'adhin, Shaykh Muhammad Ali. He was the mu'adhin of the Masjid of Murabat al-Hajj, and he knew the stars like the back of his hand. So he said, he used to always mention this line of poetry that said that people are in disagreement about everything except for hubb al-ta'am, love of food. So whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, Shia or Sunni, Christian, Jewish, atheist, whatever, there's going to be disagreement on every level except for love of food. We all love food. So human beings, by their nature, they love food. So because the human beings across the board recognize the ihsan of food, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used that as a symbol of doing ihsan, of doing good to people. Because everybody recognizes food as a symbol of ihsan. So it's symbolic. It's literal in the sense that, yes, we give food, physical food, but it's also symbolic in getting any type of benefit to those people. So this is why it's important to remember when thinking about prison dawah, doing dawah to prisoners. We have to include in our dawah of the prisons the Muslim prisoners and the non-Muslim prisoners, giving precedence, of course, to our Muslim brothers and sisters. And we have to look at giving them physical nourishment and giving them spiritual nourishment. And through the work that we do in the nonprofit that I co-founded, the Taba Foundation, we focus on mainly the spiritual nourishment and getting that to the prisoners, but we also bring in physical nourishment through our Eid banquets that we sponsor, and I'll talk about that later, but bringing in halal meat, halal zabiha meat. Because for some people, they've never had that experience. And for some prisoners that take it upon themselves to only eat zabiha, they sometimes go years without meat. I met a brother at an Eid banquet, and he said, this is the first time in 3 years that I've eaten chicken. They'll complement their diet through tuna fish and peanut butter and other sources of protein, but they're in need of food. And even like the nut loaf, the picture of the nut loaf that Imam Khalid showed to you, it's true. What is that stuff? One of the prisoners told me, when I said, what do you use your personal funds for? He says to buy things. I said, like what? He said, like toothpaste. I said, they don't give you toothpaste? He said, they give us tooth powder. Now, has anybody ever heard of tooth powder? And you've heard of tooth powder? Okay. The things that they're giving them, the food that they're giving them, is lacking in nourishment. And so to bring in, they are in need of bringing in, we're in need of giving them physical nourishment. And some of the non-Muslims that attend the Muslim Eid banquets, and when they eat the halal, they really feel it. They feel the benefit of that. And inshallah, that's a way for them to come to Islam. Now, how many more minutes do we have? Break? Okay, so I'll just, can I have 2 more minutes just to finish this? Just to contextualize it. Another thing is, and I'll go back to this, to really understand prison da'wah in the context of the Quran and the Sunnah. So we see the Quran and the Sunnah, the way the Prophet ﷺ has utilized that ayah. Another story, and this is something that every single prisoner, Muslim prisoner, relates to, is the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. And the reason it goes without saying, why is it that they relate to the story of Yusuf alayhi salam? But when Yusuf reached the prison, the first thing he did, they said he found people that had lost hope and were experiencing severe trials. Because the prisons of Egypt were not like the prisons of today. They were dungeons. And these are dungeons in their own right, but you can just imagine the medieval dungeons. So he went into the dungeons, the prison, and he met the people who were experiencing severe trials, and he began to say to them, "Asbiru, have patience, and abshiru, and have good tidings, and you will be rewarded." And they said to him, "O young man, how wonderful are the things that you say. We have been blessed with your company. Who are you, O young man?" He said, "I am the son of Safiyullah, Yaqub alayhi salam. The son of Dhabihullah, Ishaq alayhi salam. The son of Khalilullah, the friend of Allah, Ibrahim alayhi salam. He was Yusuf alayhi salam. The Kareem ibn al-Kareem ibn al-Kareem ibn al-Kareem." And they were so elated when they had met this person. And so one of the prison chaplains in California, he told me, he said Yusuf alayhi salam was the first prison chaplain because he was bringing them good news. And that in and of itself is a type of da'wah, making people feel happy. So to really understand the importance of prison da'wah, you have to understand the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, because every single prisoner, Muslim prisoner, relates to that story. So this was prison outreach, what Yusuf alayhi salam was doing. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with the prisoners of Badr, the enemies of Islam, he was doing outreach to them. And then also a thing, and I'll end on this point, Yusuf alayhi salam, why did he choose the prison? Why did Yusuf say, "As-sijnu ahabbu ilayna"? Why did he say that? Anybody?
To save himself from the women. To
save himself from the women, from the trials. Now, a lot of people that go into prison, it's very ironic that even though you see the severity of that state, and that's just giving you a snippet of what it is. In one of the prisons, when you go in there and you hear those steel bars shut, clank, even though I know that I'm going in there as a volunteer and I'm going to be able to go out, it's very eerie to hear those bars clank behind you. And one time I was in a prison and I needed to, akramakumullah, use the restroom, and they showed me where it was, and it's in plain sight of everybody else. And I said, no matter how much compassion I had, I said, I can't do that. So I had to ask to be released from the area that we were to go to use the administration. But it's a ripping away of a lot of dignity. They really rip away the dignity of the people there and place them in a situation that is very severe. But for a lot of people, that was the way they became Muslim. That was the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought them to Islam. So even though the prison, when we read the story of Yusuf, don't you feel compassion for Yusuf being in the prison for 9 years, some of the Mufassirin say, and then when he was left and forgotten by the person that had freed and he reminded him to go to the king, it was another 3 years, 12 years for this prophet of Allah, the son of a prophet of Allah, the son of a prophet of Allah, the son of a prophet of Allah, to be in prison? I'm sure many of you have cried when you hear that story. But that's the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had used to put him in the position of that he was. So for a lot of people, that's their way to Islam. And if they didn't go to prison and find Islam, they might have wound up dead on the streets. Isn't that true, Imam Khalid? Imam Khalid, may Allah preserve him, could have wound up dead on the streets of Chicago. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected him through the prison and brought him to Islam through that. So it's a interesting situation, but we have to understand that this is it's not that we're going to support the prisons for bringing people to Islam, but we're going to recognize that that's a system that's in place and try to work within it. So with that, I'll just end this contextualization of prison da'wah through the Quran and Sunnah. Prison is a safer environment for them. As harsh as it may seem, is a safer environment for them, and it causes them to start reflecting. When those doors shut, when they're alone in the prison cell, like Imam Khalid was saying, it's about this wide if you're lucky. And the double beds with the mats on, are the mats if you're lucky, right? And if you're and at least those look like they were latex covers, so you didn't get fleas or bed bugs, because it's a serious degrading position to be in for your humanity. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings the tayyib out of the khabith. And He brings light out of darkness. And from between blood and the filth of the stomach, of the intestines, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings milk that quenches our thirst. So there's amazing things happening in the prison. And this is just a reminder to us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to guide people no matter where they are. No matter where they are. It's going to happen whether we're a part of it or not. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to bring the da'wah. Now, to understand more about the prison, about da'wah in the prisons, it's important to understand the prison structure. And it varies from area to area. But just quickly, prisons in the U.S., like Imam Khalid mentioned, we have 5% of the world's population and a quarter of the world's prisoners. China has 1.2 billion people, and they only have 1.6 million prisoners. In the U.S., we have 2.3 million people behind bars. Why is that? Well, one of the reasons is, and I'm not going to go into all of the details, but for many of you that are surfers, I think everybody here is a surfer, right? Even with the internet surfers, Wikipedia, Google, all of those things. Just type in some keywords. One of them is prison industries, prison lobbying, the taxes that goes to them. There's a lot of reasons why imprisonment is encouraged in the U.S. And we're not going to go into all of the details, but there's privatization of industries. Somebody told me that in Chicago, one of the things that, or somewhere in Illinois, that they look at the third graders and their dropout and the delinquency rate to begin preparing prisons for them. Third grade. Third grade is what? 8 years old? Rather than prepare ways for them to be rehabilitated, they're preparing prisons for them so that they can use taxpayer money, state and federal taxpayer money, to fund them. In California, it goes from $20,000 per prisoner, that's the cheapest, to $500,000 if they're in a medical facility. There's a lot of, one of the strongest lobbying groups are the prison authority groups, because it maintains their jobs. So that's something that you can do, reading on the internet to find more about, just to understand prisons in the U.S. A huge population, 2.3 million. There's many nations in the world that don't have 2.3 people. So one of the things to remember about the prison population in the U.S., it is a nation within itself. And National Geographic did an interesting documentary. They called it Prison Nation. And that was the first time that I thought that of the prison population in the U.S. as a nation. It is at 2.3 million people. You can populate a nation with 2.3 million people. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends prophets to every nation and with their languages. And the scholars are the inheritors of prophets. So there's going to be people that go to the mountains of certain countries, to the deep forests of the Amazon. And there's going to be people that go to the prison nation and to do da'wah to the people in the prison nation. Also, it's important to understand there's varying types of levels of incarceration in the U.S. There's juvenile detention centers for the people that are less than, under 18 years old. And oftentimes those juvenile detention systems are worse than the adult penitentiaries. And that's where they get a lot of their training to just go wild in the prisons. And a lot of people, if they're released back into society, they get their training in those juvenile detention centers on how to perfect their crimes. So it's not set up. The situation is not set up for rehabilitation. There's also county jails, and it's important to understand the difference between jails and prisons. Jails, like Imam Khalid was mentioning, the Cook County Jail, it's a holding facility, a pretrial holding facility. If you have a short stay in jail, they're not going to send you to a penitentiary or a prison. They're going to send you to the jail, and you spend out your day, your week, your month, whatever it is. Once you go to trial and you get your final sentence, then you go to a prison. In the U.S., there's state prisons and there's federal prisons. The state prisons vary in their administration levels, and then there's the federal institutions. So for those of you that want to learn more about da'wah in prisons, you can do a little research on just understanding the prison structure in the U.S. One thing that's also important to realize is that a lot of people that are in prison are mentally ill. And one of the things that happened in the history of the U.S. is that there used to be many, many mental institutions where people could be committed involuntarily and spend the rest of their lives in those mental institutions. Well, there was a big change in the U.S. structure of mental health and mental illness, and so they got rid of a lot of those mental institutions. For those of you who are in high school, you might have read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. right? It's just a snippet of what the mental institutions used to be like in the U.S. up until the 50s and 60s with the forced lobotomies and so on and so forth. Well, once they get rid of all those mental institutions, where do those mentally ill people go? To the streets or to prison? And there's one psychiatrist in California that does a lot of work in the prisons. His name is Dr. Terry Cooper. There's also an interesting interview with him and a man that spent 28 years in Angola prison in solitary confinement. Solitary confinement means you're by yourself. And if you're lucky, you get to get out of your cell for half an hour a day, or maybe sometime during the week. But he spent 28 years in his life in Angola State Prison. And there's also a documentary about Angola State Prison, which Angola State Prison, it's something, the Cook County jail is 92 acres. I can't remember exactly how many acres, but it's, I think, thousands of acres. They have farms, cattle, horses. They have their own radio show, their own rodeo, everything. It's a city within itself. It's called Angola because it was built on the Angola plantation, the place where they used to have a plantation. And it was called the Angola plantation because that's where they used to bring slaves from Angola to acclimate them to American climate and then release them into the slave society. So it's very eerie to see a prison with the majority African American, or a large percentage of the population being African American, and they're in chains with their farming tools on their back, and to see a soldier on or not a soldier, but a police officer on the back of a horse with his gun and just leading these men off to the fields. So it's a different time, but the picture is the same. So Terry Cooper said that he estimates, based on his studies in California, 50% of the California prison population have some sort of mental illness. So the prisons have just become an alternative to mental health institutions, which shows you just another level of oppression. They're not getting the proper health, the proper treatment that they need, because for many people, with the right medication, with the right rehabilitation, they can change that way of life. The next is a short history of Islam in the U.S. prisons. I'm not an expert of the history of Islam in the U.S. prisons. Imam Khalid would be a better source of information on that, and for those of you who would like to learn more about the history of Islam in the U.S. prisons, people like himself could tell you more about it. But basically, there are various groups doing dawah in prisons. The Sunnis are doing dawah in the prisons. The Nation of Islam, of course, is doing dawah in the prisons. The Shia are doing dawah in the prisons. The Ahmadiyya movement, like Imam Khalid mentioned, he got an Ahmadiyya Quran. In the LA County Jail, it has upwards of 10,000 inmates and about 10,000 workers. It's almost like a one-for-one ratio. So it's a great job. It's great for the economy to have prisons and jails. They have 10,000 prisoners, and the Ahmadiyya community has a lot of da'wah, and they distribute hundreds or thousands of Qur'ans to the prisoners in the LA County Jail. And then from the LA County Jail, then those prisoners are, if they're to serve time in a prison, they're filtered off into the other 30-odd prisons within the state of California, and they all now have their Ahmadiyya Qur'an. So their first introduction to Islam, they're thinking they're getting pure Islam, but they're getting the Qadiani version, which is not Islam. So for some people, and they were sincerely going to this thinking this was Islam. And the onus really is on us as the Muslim community. Why aren't we just giving them the regular copies of the Qur'an? We have contact with some students through our organization in a penitentiary, federal penitentiary in Boscoville, Wisconsin. And one brother sent a letter, and he said that there were 17 Muslims sharing one mushaf. One mushaf. Just think of the masahif in your house. It's probably a 4-to-1 ratio, right? Every time somebody gets married, every time somebody comes back from Hajj, the masahif are just plentiful. 17 brothers sharing one mushaf. That's just the Qur'an. Now, alhamdulillah, one of the things, we brought this up to ICNA, that does the Why Islam, and they do the free distribution of Qur'ans. May Allah give them to success in continuing that. But we collaborated with ICNA to where if we get any requests for Qur'ans, we just direct it towards ICNA, and that's something that I can offer to you. They distribute Qur'ans for free. You can just type it in through their website, on the Why Islam website, through the ICNA website, and they can send free Qur'ans to whoever it is, and also basic Islamic material. So that's something that we're working towards. trying to change. So the Sunnis are doing da'wah, the Shia are also doing a lot of da'wah, so it's that much more important for us as the Sunni community to be able to offer material to people in the prisons so that they get a correct understanding of Islam. So there's various people that have done, the American Society of Muslims, also known as the Worth Deen movement, has done a lot of da'wah within the prisons and establishing the chaplaincy. I'm more familiar with the California prison system, but the American Society of Muslims has spent a lot of time to just establish the right for the Muslims to have an imam at their prison that they can go to and facilitate Jum'ah. And we're not talking about higher level studies, we're talking about the basics. How many of you realize that wearing a kufi is a huge right, a privilege that you have? Because in the prisons, in many prisons, they don't allow them to wear headgear, and so some of them had to sue for the right to wear a kufi, the right to have a tasbih, the right just to have prayer beads, just the right to have a tasbih, the right to have a prayer rug, a sajjada, the right to wear utur. We just keep the bottles in our pocket, don't even think twice. You put some perfume on you. The prisoners, they weren't even allowed to do that, and they had to sue for that right, to be able to do that. Some of the basic things. It's taken them years just to give the Muslim prisoners in California halal meat, zabiha meat. Otherwise, they either eat the non-zabiha meat, or for the people that say, no, I'm not going to do that, they eat turkey or whatever else, sorry, not turkey, tuna fish, or peanut butter or other things. So that's something I mentioned to people also when we talk about the importance of zabiha. They say, oh, Ahl al-Kitab. There's people in the prisons that go years without meat, and here we are with easy access to halal meat at the stores, and we're saying Ahl al-Kitab. And there they are in the prisons going years without meat because they're firm. They said this is part of our identity that we want to eat zabiha meat. Now I'm not going to go on to the zabiha meat, but now the majority or many of the prisoners in the prisons are African American, and one of the reasons for that is that they make up a large portion of the prison system, but they're overrepresented in the prison system. There's the percentage, it's not equal to what's going on outside, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Just to give you an example, and this just shows you the oppression of the system that they're within. There's one brother who studied with us for a number of years through our correspondence course. He had a nonviolent drug offense, crack cocaine, when he was a juvenile, 17 years old. He should have been tried as a juvenile and gone through the whole juvenile detention center and so forth, but they tried him as a juvenile, convicted him as an adult, and gave him life in prison for possession of crack cocaine. He wasn't selling it, he wasn't stealing it, but it was possession of crack cocaine. Now, one statistic that will shock a lot of people, and it should shock you, for every 100 convictions of crack cocaine, you know how many there are for cocaine? 1. And who uses cocaine and who uses crack? That's clear racism within the prison system. Clear. And they're trying to change it right now. But that's one of the reasons why there's an overrepresentation of African Americans in prison. It's not because, like some of the critics say, that they're just more prone to crime. No. That's right there in the law. You can look it up on the internet. The system is against certain populations, namely the poor urban populations. So the majority, or many prisoners, are African American. The majority of Muslims in the prisons are African American just because a bulk of the prisons are made up of African Americans. But another reason why African Americans become Muslim in the prison, it's the same reason why they become Muslim on the street, is because a lot of them, they recognize that their forefathers were stolen from Africa, brought over here, and they're trying to regain their identity through a connection to where they come from. Now, if they start reading their history and they go back to West Africa, what are they going to find? Muslims. So for a lot of people, they recognize my grandfather might have been, most probably was Muslim. And there was a Mauritanian Shaykh who was here in the U.S. and they took him to a dentist who was African American. He wasn't a dentist, who was African American but was not Muslim. So the Mauritanian Shaykh was giving him dawah, and so he started telling him through the translator about Islam and so forth. And then he said, you know, you really need to become Muslim. And the man said, you know, if I become Muslim, my mother will turn over in her grave. And the Mauritanian Shaykh, Shaykh Khatri, he said, if you don't become Muslim, your grandfather's going to turn over in his grave. Because he was Muslim, most probably. So there's a lot of da'wah going on in the prisons through many various organizations, and a lot of people have established, and I'm not even going to go into that because I don't want to detract from the countless hours that people have spent to establish the chaplaincy and the work of da'wah within the prisons, and alhamdulillah, the majority of da'wah in the prisons is Sunni Islam. Some of the people that become Muslim do become Muslim in prison. Another reality that we have to face as a Muslim community, and as a reminder to us, especially those of us who have children, that many people that go into the prison are born Muslims. And they either come from immigrant families or they come from convert. Their parents converted. And most people, they hear that and they think, oh, not me, not my kid. Right? My kid would never do drugs. The parents that say that, my kid would never, do such and such, it's most probably their child that's doing it. I just spoke to a lady a few days ago in the Bay Area, and she said she knows of a family friend who the son, they found out, was doing drugs, and it was sold drugs by another Muslim. And the reason why he was doing drugs is because his parents wanted him to get into high-level colleges, right, universities, pursue a medical degree. He was under so much stress that he started using drugs to deal with the stress. So this is a reality. Muslims that don't really have a constant concern for their children in really in any country, you just take one step off the Sirat al-Mustaqim and it's a sharp fall. But it's the Sirat al-Mustaqim is wide and there's plenty of room for all of us. But it's deep ravines on both edges. And don't think for an instant that you can't fall off, and don't think for an instant that your children can't fall off. So it's very important to bring your children to the masajid, to have them involved in the community, and to be part of their lives. To be part of their lives. You should maintain the authority figure as a parent with your children, but you should also be your child's friend. You should be somebody that your child can confide in you. Because if he's not confiding in you, it's easy to hide things. Now we have internet, text, everything. They could be leading a total double life without us even realizing it. Is that far-fetched? And they could be right there with the computer right in front of you. Gee, acha. Yes, na'am baba. Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, sure. Right? Right there in front of you. And end up in the prison. So there's people, and I met one brother, he grew up and he spent a lot of time in the madaris within the community here in the US. And there he is in prison. And he was giving the khutbah that Jum'ah that we attended in the prison. And he was saying some days he just wakes up in the morning and just wants to bang the concrete walls that he's in that 6 by 8 foot cell and just bang it. Because he's just frustrated with the reality of being confined. And it's not just confinement, it's just the ripping away of the dignity that they have placed in those prison systems. Now, to go to the next slide about Toba. Well, okay, sorry, the Dawah in prison, that was, actually, can you go to the next slide? The Dawah in prison was about the, if you go back one slide? Okay, so I'll just go through Toba. One of the important things to realize about the spread of Islam in prisons is about Toba and about redemption and the importance of Toba. Because, to be honest, some people need to be in prisons. Some people, isn't that right, Imam Khalid? They're not fit to be on the streets. They're a danger to themselves and they're a danger to others. Am I making for those of brothers that are more expert than me? Correct me if I'm wrong. No?
You own the money.
I'm on, right?
You own the money.
There's some people, they need to be in prison. But not everybody that's in prison needs to be in prison. Now, and we recognize that as Muslims, and the reason we recognize that is because of our understanding of Toba, of redemption. No matter what you do, there's always a way out. And we all know the story of the person who killed 99 people. And wallahi al-azim, as I stand here before you, Imam Zayd told me that he was in a prison and he gave a talk and he mentioned the story about the man who killed 99 people. The story, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, he killed 99 people. He went to somebody, he said, is there Toba for me? The man said, no, there's no Toba. He killed him out of anger. How can you tell me there's no Toba? Then he went to another person, now he's murdered 100 people. And he went to another man and he told him the story, if you go to such and such city, you can get your Toba. He died along the way. And then the angels came down and they were struggling over which way, the malaika of the adab or the malaika of the rahmah, the angels of mercy or punishment, who's going to take him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had accepted his tawbah because he was on the way, he was making hijrah away from that. just as a side note, that hadith is very important also to understand that in the prison system here, when prisoners parole, when they leave prison, they can't just go wherever they want. They can't just go make hajj. They can't go visit their mother. They can't leave the county. They're paroled, and usually they're paroled back to the place where they committed their crime, right? Which is the wrong place to put them, because that's where their friends are, that's where they're familiar, that's where everything is easy for them. That's how they know how to be, how they used to be. But if you put him in a total foreign new situation, now he's forced to change, because he can't fall back. And so one of the hikmahs that we take from that hadith is that he was ordered to leave the place where he was used to murder and go to a new place. So that's where we have a philosophical difference between the prison system as it is today in the US and the Islamic understanding of Toba. Imam Zayd mentioned that story, Imam Zayd Shaykh mentioned that story in a prison, and he said there was a man that came up, a Mexican man that was involved in gangs, and he had murdered 2 people. And he became Muslim because of hearing that hadith. Because he said, I murdered 2 people. He was Catholic. He said, I murdered 2 people, and I thought Allah, God, could never forgive me. So there's no purpose of me trying to be religious. And that's the way the shaitan will delude us. Either, oh, everything's fine, alhamdulillah, Allah will forgive me for whatever I do, right, over on this side. Or the other side, yes, despair from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so that person, the shaitan, had got him into a state of severe despair from the rawhillah, from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the point that he didn't think Allah could forgive him, so what's the point? But when he heard that hadith, in the context of his life, he became Muslim. So we recognize that people can change. And that's what's important. And there are sincere people, non-Muslims, in the prison system that are trying to help people change their lives. We're not trying to paint it as just a dark, dungeness system. There are people. But there are also other people that really don't care if people change their lives. In fact, they will encourage it. Drugs get into the prisons. There's brothers with iPhones in the prisons, maintaining their Facebook. One brother told me, he said he knows a Muslim that spends 16 hours a day on his iPhone in the prison. I'm thinking, how does he get the iPhone? He said, you'd be amazed what gets in that prison. And it's the prison guards that are bringing it. They bring in the phones. And one brother had a laptop, and he was taking it out onto the yard and watching DVDs. There's other guards that bring in the phones, then they tell other people to go confiscate the phones. They take the phones, and then they sell it back to other people in the prison. Drugs get into the prison. Alcohol gets into the prison. They make their own alcohol, Pruno. Make it from prune juice and other things. There's a lot of vices within the prisons. And this is helped by the guards. And for some of you who may not know, there was even a scandal in in the California prisons where they were doing gladiator fightings between people. The guards were putting bets on these people, rival gang members, setting up to where they could meet each other on in the units and just watching them fight. And then sometimes if the guy they bet on loses, they would shoot the other guy. Oh, we had an excuse. There was a riot attempt. So there's a lot of foul things that go on in the prisons. But there are sincere people that try to help people in their Toba. For us as Muslims, we cannot discount. That's the first thing in the step to helping people spread dawah. We cannot discount the people in the prisons, both the Muslims and the non-Muslims, say, and just write them off. The Prophet ﷺ never wrote anybody off. If he wrote anybody off, who would have been the first person that he wrote off, but he was making dua for? Umar and Abu Jahl. Some of the main, staunchest enemies to Islam, he didn't write them off because he looked what they had inside him. He looked, as he said, that the people are ma'adin, ka'ma'adin al-dhahabi wal-fidda. The people are ores, like gold and silver. And there's a lot of people that are gold and they're silver, but they're just encrusted with all this filth. So the Prophet ﷺ didn't take them for their outward, he took them for what they had inside, and he was trying to extract that. So we cannot discount anybody, and we can't even discount ourselves. Don't discount who you are, because you might have something in you that Islam can bring it out and polish it. So that's what we have to realize when we're doing da'wah in the prisons and when we're doing da'wah anywhere. Another thing, if you look at many of the Sahaba and their quote-unquote criminal records, if they were transported to today, they would be behind those bars right there. Because they were murderers, substance abuse, theft, murder, child murder, organized prostitution. They had it. There's a word for the people that deal with those guys. Some of the Sahaba used to be that, right? They had their slave girls and they would pimp them out. And Allah says in the Quran, don't do that. Don't do that to those slave women. So they would be right in there behind those bars. But the light of Islam changed them. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can change the Sahaba into amazing individual that we say when we mention their name, radiallahu anhu, he was a murderer and a thief and an oppressor. The same thing is happening in the prisons today. And honestly, and I say this to you honestly, there are few groups of people that I've sat with in my life that reminded me or gave me a glimpse of what the Sahaba were like. But when I sit with brothers in the prison, that's one of the feelings that I get. Honestly, I'm saying that. Because there's a level of sincerity that they have for the deen, and an identity that they gain from the deen, and a pride, not an arrogant pride. We're not talking about kibr. We're talking about izzah, dignity. They gain a level of dignity from the pride that is very rare to come across in free society. And other people see that. Non-Muslims see it on the yard. The guards see it when they say, you walk differently. You talk differently. They can see that izzah that those people are embodying. How many of us, when we walk down the street, can people notice that we're different? And I'm not talking about wearing a thobe, a kufi, or a beard. They see something in you, that you're walking with a purpose. But that's something that you can find in the prisons and also other places. So through Toba they changed. But Toba is a process that requires knowledge for proper rehabilitation. It doesn't mean just becoming Muslim. It's important to study the shurut of Toba, the conditions of Toba. One of the conditions is that you recognize what you were doing is wrong. That you make an intention never to return to that thing again, and to address any harm that you might have inflicted on a person. If somebody stole something, they have to repay that thing. If they hurt somebody, if they spoke slander and ruined somebody's reputation, they have to work towards fixing that. But the point that I want to focus in on is the intention to never do that again. There are people in the prison, the only reason why they're not involved in criminal activity is because they don't have access to it. But you put them right back on the street, and it's right back to there, because Toba never happened. So iqla' is one of the things. You have to stop what you're doing to make Toba. You have to stop it. So in the prisons, they've achieved that. They've stopped what they were doing. If they are not involved in criminal activity in the prison, stop it. But the next thing is the intention never to do that again. And for a lot of people, and this is proven by, and I'm speaking about the general prison population, there's a high, what they call, Imam Khalid was mentioning this, the recidivism rate. That's the rate of people that get out of prisons and go right back in, the revolving door of the prison system. And a lot of things, like I mentioned, the parole system, a lot of things are set up. They literally could have been years in prison, had a great record, involved in programs, led programs to rehabilitate others, rehabilitated themselves, good psychiatric tests, everything. They're getting out, they got a job, they got an apartment, everything, and he got pulled over for not wearing a seatbelt. Back. And I'm speaking from a person that went back for, I can't remember how many months because of that, for not wearing the seatbelt. So there's a lot of things set up to maintain that recidivism rate. There's also not a lot of funding for people to be involved in society. They'll put $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year to maintain a prison while behind bars. When they get out of society, where's that funding? There's nothing. There's barely a drop in the bucket compared to what they were spending to help them get back onto their feet. But if a Muslim has made Toba and made that intention never to return to that wrong, when they get out, no matter what problems they're faced with, they're not going to fall back into that. And there's many stories, amazing stories, that you can see of people that have lived that. Imam Khalid is sitting right here in front of us. There's some other brothers here that are going to come up and speak, and I'm looking forward to hearing their stories. They're living examples of people that have made Toba. So we have to recognize that and encourage that. And recognize also that Toba, there's a need for knowledge. There's an extreme need for knowledge. And there's a lack of access to proper education, Islamic education, within the prisons. And so that's where people like Imam Khalid, other chaplains, us at the Taba Foundation, we're trying to facilitate that. The example of the brothers in Wisconsin that 17 had to share one mushaf, that's a mushaf. What about access to things such as books of the Sunnah, to understand the Sunnah, books of fiqh, to understand the rulings, and to even understand rulings that are specifically associated to them. So this is one of the things that through Taba, we recognize that one of the problems is that many people becoming Muslim or interested in the Muslims, interested in Islam, have lacked the basic needs and materials to practice the religion. There's a lack of educational material. There's a lack of proper instruction. While the Christians are sending in hordes of volunteers to train their people. Did you see that in Cook County Jail? The Christians, the Catholic community, were the Muslims like that?
No.
We're not going in there. The Catholics are going in there. We were at one Eid banquet where, this is kind of funny but sad at the same time, the only community that the Muslim chaplain could find to support their programs was a church led by a lesbian. And she used to come to the Eid banquets with her wife. And yet she would give them blank checks. You need Sahih Bukhari? Here you go. 6 yards? 6 copies. Tirmidhi? Here you go. What else do you need? Qurans? Here you go. $3,000 for halal meat for the Eid banquet? Here you go. And show up to the Eid banquets with a contingency of people. And I watched them come in, and they didn't, like, we were with a group, we all kind of sat at the same table. There was about 10 of them. It was each one at a table. So the Christians are doing a lot of prison outreach. Us as the Muslim community, we don't have that same access into the prisons. And one of the reasons is because a lot of communities don't know the extent of Islam in the prisons, whereas in the African American communities, they're at a stage, they're at a much more advanced stage than many of the immigrant community, because they've been doing this work for decades. And many of the communities that have not been doing this, they don't even know about it. So first we have to know about it, then we have to learn how to bring in those volunteers. And it's not just somebody just go in there with a good heart. You have to be trained to be able to do that. Also, like Imam Khalid mentioned, the outside communities are not fully supporting these inmates when they come back onto the streets. So part of prison da'wah is, while they're in the prisons, getting educational material to them, giving them instruction, answering questions, and sometimes it's very serious questions. I had one brother who called me, and he studied with me for a number of years, to where, mashallah, I told him, I said, if you got out of prison, I would put you in the top 10% of imams in the U.S. as far as knowledge base. And he got everything in the prison. And he would call me with serious questions, and then I would give him the answer, the hukum, and he would say, that's what I thought, based on my studies and understanding, I just wanted to check it with you. There was one person who was a white Muslim, and in the California prisons, it's very segregated to the racial lines. It's so segregated, if you cross over, it could mean the death penalty to you. So if this white Muslim was seen, isn't that right, Imam Taha? Right? Imam Taha is an old friend of mine from, beautiful to see him here, from Mir Tahir, originally from the Bay Area. You could be killed as a white person for hanging out with the African American community. The majority of Muslims in the prisons were African Americans. So if you're a Muslim hanging out with the Muslims, that's not the way the prison population sees it. They see it as a white man hanging out with the brothers, the African Americans, and it meant death to him. He couldn't give salams to the Muslims. He couldn't even, I said, well, could he pray on it? Because his question was, how does he do his prayer? And I said, well, the person that's in a situation like that, they can just pray sitting down. They said, well, what about wudu? Because if they see him doing wudu, they know that he's a Muslim, and they would kill him. The Aryan Brotherhood. And then I said, okay, well, can he pray I said, can he pray standing up with just his eyes? He said, that's not the issue. The issue is wudu or tayammum. He can't do anything. Even when he would walk by a Muslim, it might be, I'm a Muslim. And so he was in a situation where just to be able to pray, he feared for his life, and he ended up not praying, which was his hukum, because he feared for his life. So, we at the Taba Foundation, we aim to provide high-quality Islamic education, not just send in a bunch of pamphlets and expect them to understand that and not have access to somebody that can answer their very specific questions. Like, what do you do if you're in solitary confinement? This one brother asked me, and you don't have water to do wudu, and you don't have anything to do tayammum on, and the walls are covered in human excrement. What do you do? Or like Imam Khalid said, you saw all those cells have a toilet in them. You're going to be making your salat right next to a toilet. So there's many situations that are very specific to the prisoners, and they need to have serious people that understand their situation and can give them the correct hukum according to Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, but specific to their context. Not just giving them a brain that, oh, that's haram, this halal, because it's not going to work. Just like in any community, you have to have somebody that understands their situation to give them. So that's what we aim to do. We also aim to provide rehabilitation programs, not only for Muslims, but also for non-Muslims, as a type of da'wah, like I mentioned in the first situation, in the first session, that giving people food is not just giving them physical food, it's giving them spiritual nourishment. And there's some people that they just need proper rehabilitation. Some of our top students have developed a program called the Timeless Program that's now actually being recognized by the state of California, and they're going to work towards implementing it in other institutions. And we've sponsored the brothers working on the Timeless Program, sending them money, books, and other material to use for their programs. Also to provide re-entry programs. And some of our students have already released, and we're working to get them set up through re-entry programs. One of the ways that we do is look at the resources that are already available in the community. So there are some transitional housing, but it's very difficult. Like Imam Khalid mentioned, a lot of it is Christian-based. So they go from a very regimented society of making salah in jama'ah. One brother told me, he said, since I became Muslim, he said, I've never prayed by myself. It's been jama'ah for every single prayer. And if somebody sleeps, there's somebody, hey brother, salah, jama'ah, atmamat salah, it's time to pray. There's somebody there on you all the time. If somebody's slipping, there's somebody there to check him. He gets out into free society, goes into a Christian-based house, it's very difficult for him to get back on his feet. So we're working with established organizations that have non-denominational type housing to house people that are coming out, and to offer them assistance through also our zakat distribution to people in the re-entry program. So Toba is a non-profit, registered non-profit, charitable and educational organization. We do zakat distribution both to people in the prisons as well as people in the outside of the prisons. Inside the prisons, because our lawyers and also our advisors from esteemed elders within the chaplain community have advised us against sending cash to prisoners, we send in educational material. So we've worked out with some fuqaha the process of taking that zakat money and converting it into educational material, books, CDs, audios, videos, so forth, and sending that as zakat to the prisoners, because the majority of prisoners can't afford to buy the books and so forth. Just to give you an idea, and type in prison industries if you want to see what's going on in the prisons, and look up the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment, because what is it in the 13th Amendment that applies to prisoners?
Unless you're convicted of a crime, slavery.
Slavery is outlawed in America, right?
Unless except.
Across the board, no slavery in America. Look in the 13th Amendment and see how proud an American would be if he read that. Slavery and indentured servitude, it's not word for word, is abolished in America except as a crime for a punishment. By the Constitution of the U.S., they can enslave prisoners. And when they're working them in heavy industry, prison industries, making license plates and making furniture and moving companies and welding jobs and so forth, and paying them 35 cents an hour. And then those prisoners work the whole month, constantly, every day, working, and at the end of the month he gets his paycheck of 50, 60 bucks. If he's lucky, if the state has not taken back some of that money to repay the expenses that he's caused the state. So then he takes that 50 or 60 bucks that he's made for a month and he wants to buy an Islamic book that costs $30. Imagine that. If you're making, so let's say $6,000 a month, would you spend $3,000 on Islamic educational material? Well, he's making 60 bucks a month and spending $30 on Islamic educational material. That's half his salary that he would try to have used to buy his toothpaste, so he doesn't have to use tooth powder. Did this turn off? So forth. So we want to, through our zakat distribution, make sure that the Islamic educational material is accessible to them, and then also through, once they're released into society, use the zakat funds to pay for their needs, and usually we try to do it by figuring out what is it their needs are, and we try to pay directly towards that. There's also other examples that we have of our zakat distribution, and we've worked out with a team of esteemed scholars to make sure that our whole process of zakat distribution is in line with the Sharia, as well as speaking with the chaplains and lawyers to make sure that it's in line well within the lines of the U.S. law. Just to give you a little bit about who we are, we're a core of dedicated volunteers working since 2002. I've personally been working in prison outreach since 2002. This was first done on a personal level, And then also through Zaytuna Institute's prison outreach program, but then they phased it out as they moved on towards their college. And from there, we continued the work on a personal level, just individual volunteer level. And then we established our nonprofit in 2008. One of the things that we are doing is working with other communities as a bridge to help prison outreach. Because it doesn't make sense to have every single masjid or every single community develop a prison outreach program. Because it's a highly niche, highly specialized area that it would be impossible for every community to have. So similar to what Dar al-Hikmah does in their philosophy, as I understand it, rather than having one location, they go from amongst the masajid that are already established and they utilize that underutilized space. So what we do, and we've already contacted a number of organizations within the Bay Area, we approach them, we say, do you have a prison outreach program? Most of them say no. They have a stack of letters from Muslim inmates. They have people that come to the masajid, and we say, just outsource your prison outreach to us. So we don't have to have a location to do our prison outreach, other than our office to maintain organization and so forth. But we don't have to have actual location where we're paying high rent and so forth. We're actually working in an office right now that's donated. So we want to act as a bridge with other communities and network. There's many, many different people around the U.S. that have been doing this before Taba Foundation, and there are our respected elders, and we want to make sure that they know that and that we respect that, and we're looking for their advice. We teach inmates through correspondence. We're also developing Islamic curriculum. We network with communities to act as a bridge, sponsor Eid banquets. One of the things that we've also done is worked with a collaboration with ICNA, who does distribution of zabiha meat from the Eid, the Udhiyah meat. And rather than us going through the whole process of collecting the community's money, going to the farms, slaughtering it in accordance with halal and USDA standards, freezing it, shipping, and so forth, ICNA does all that. We work with the prisons to see who needs the meat, and then they ship it out to those places in refrigerated trucks. So you can, on the ICNA Bay Area chapter website, you can find a program called Feed the Prisoners. We've taught a number of students in a number of state and federal facilities who have in turn, by a conservative estimate of our students, reached hundreds of people through dawah and teaching. We've developed the majority of our curriculum that we use for the prisoners. And just to give you an example, one of the prisoners that was released after participating in our program, he met an Imam, and he wanted to study with him a book that he studied through our correspondence course. The Imam, who was an esteemed Imam from a very reputable community, said, "What? I didn't know there was a book about that." When he told me that story, I said, "Look, brother, you were in the middle of a prison, and you had access to material that most Imams don't even know that book exists." That's amazing to see that that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to get people their hidayah wherever they are. And there's people in solitary confinement that become Muslim. From what I heard, even Imam Jamil al-Amin had, through solitary confinement, made da'wah to a person that was a grand wizard in the KKK, and he became Muslim just through the air vents. So Allah will guide people. Now, just as our near-term goals, we want to accept. We have a long waiting list of students, but we can't accommodate them right now. Our near-term goals is to begin accepting those students on our waiting list, increase our networks to include more communities, such as in the Chicago community, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here today. Also, after being invited by Dar al-Hikmah to present about our prison da'wah, but also to network with other communities like Imam Khalid and other communities that are already doing this work, and to see where we can collaborate, so we're not reinventing the wheel. Our far-term goals is that we want to have a system to be in the entire life, part of the entire life cycle of a prisoner, from da'wah to shahada to education to re-entry into society. We want to have our Islamic curriculum approved by chaplain associations as well as prison administrations. And a lot of chaplains, they're looking for this, an approved curriculum specifically tailored for the prisons. Administrations are asking for this, so we're working to try to fill that need. And so one of the things, you have this take-home packet, and I'll just go over it briefly before ending and allowing the panel to start, is if you're interested in helping prison da'wah, the first thing is, do not attempt to begin this work without direction from qualified people. No matter how sincere you are, no matter how good-hearted you are, you could cause issues if you don't know how to go about this. Because even though you may be sincere, the prison system their number one concern is security. Before rehabilitation, before religious education, their primary concern is the security of the security of the administration and the security. So if they see you as a threat to security, by not knowing the prison rules and guidelines, you could end up harming yourself or others. Contact local groups or individuals, and don't receive any contact personally. Always go through a volunteer chaplain or an organization. Don't ever do anything on a personal level. Personal phone numbers, personal address, home addresses. Always go through an organization. Imam Khalid's contact is there. You have somebody, a great resource right here in your community to be able to do that. And there's some other information there. The last two things I'll say is supplicate for them, make dua, because we believe in the power of dua. Reflect on yourself and reflect on the ayah about the prisoners that I went over in the first part of the session, and think about the prisoners. And read the story of Yusuf with reflection. Because Yusuf alayhi salam is the symbol in the Quran of a Muslim prisoner. And feel for them. And when you read the story of Surah Yusuf and you think about the prisoners, it'll cause a lot of depression to remove. The ulama have said by reading Surah Yusuf, you can remove depression. And one of the reasons is because then you'll appreciate your blessings. So the next time your computer crashes, and you get real frustrated, or you don't get your order the way it is at the halal restaurant, hopefully you're not going to a non-halal restaurant, right? Or something happens, the bill you have to spend too long on the orbits to get your thing fixed, whatever it is. When you get that frustration, think about the brothers in the prison eating nut loaf. Praying in those prisons, in those cells right next to the toilets. Trying to save themselves when a war breaks out, when a prison riot breaks out, just to save themselves so they're not involved in that. So just reflect on that and reflect on your blessings. And again, it's a pleasure being here and an honor to be here and speaking to you. And I'm not the most knowledgeable person, I'm not the most person in a state to be speaking, but that's just the way things have worked out. So I ask Simah, please excuse me for those of you who are more knowledgeable than me, people that have more taqwa than me, people that have more experience than me, and I hope to be just a part of the Muslim body, like Brother Brian was saying earlier. We're all part of this body, and part of our body is in the prison, and we're just trying to help those people. And we'll answer any questions that you have in the question and answer session. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.
Takbir.
Allahu Akbar.
Is that?
Jazakumullah khairan. So, inshallah, while we set up, I'd like to, first of all, thank Shaykh Rami. Whenever we call guest speakers, it's always a pleasure to meet scholars from around the United States. Of course, appreciate them from coming from so far away. But it's amazing, subhanAllah, the experiences of different people in the United States. One thing that prompted us to even hold this workshop was a discussion I had with Imam Khalid about how underdeveloped the prison dawa system is in Illinois. Even though we have the arguably oldest established community in the United States, especially in the African American community, this is like the center of so many groups. And the nation was based here, the Warthi Muhammad group was based here. It's amazing that despite the large Muslim population and despite all of our experience as a community, we have such an underdeveloped system. And in California, we just got a glimpse of how much is already going on and how how many results they've already seen. One of the things that we want to do through the Hikmah is, of course, network with organizations that are doing something practical so that we can become a part of that process. And you can imagine, I just want to tell you just one personal experience that really, personally got me aware of the possibilities in prisons. Not like the plight of Muslims in prisons, but the possibilities as well. When I was studying in Pakistan and my final year of study, I met an individual, a scholar, who even by face didn't play the part. just really common looking man. And I met him and I was speaking to him, and the more I learned about him, the more I was shocked. One thing in conversing with him I found out was that he was a graduate of a madrasa, highly trained, and that he single-handedly had developed a system of education for Muslims in the Pakistan prison system. And he had set up already such an established system that they had a madrasa system throughout Pakistan's jails, where there were people coming out of prison having graduated from a Madrasa Nizami system. So they were coming out scholars. And they had a wifat, like a board, that was examining, that was testing all of these students of ilm in the prison system. And so they were coming out at 4th year, 5th year, 6th year level. Some of them had already graduated, but they had requirements for their reformation to go and to spend some time in a spiritual lodge or the khanqa or in tabligh. And it was one of the conditions that as part of the process. But they had developed a system. And what I was thinking, what I was reflecting on was not the fact that the system was developed, but that one person had this thought that maybe we shouldn't neglect this subsection of our society. And now all those hundreds or thousands of people who come out of prison having now learned something, done Toba, that one person's going to get all that reward. And we have that opportunity here in the Illinois prison system, where that hasn't yet been developed. So as I hand over the microphone to the brothers, I'd like us to reflect about what we can do as individuals. One of the things that we can do, of course, is personally learn about Dawah. Next semester, which begins at the end of January, or the first weekend of February, registration for Dawah Hikmah's courses, the spring courses, begins, inshallah, at the end of December. We will be holding for the first time a course, a 14-week course on the fiqh of Dawah. Dawah amongst non-Muslims, Dawah amongst Muslims, Dawah in the prison system, Dawah in all different all the different elements of Dawah and aspects of Dawah. And I think it's very useful. In fact, I would consider it to be a fard ayn, because Dawah is something that is obligatory for everybody, regardless of where you are. If you work in the corporate world, you work, or you're at school, or you're a teacher, you're a professional. Regardless of what position you hold in society, you always have opportunities to call people towards Islam, to share what you have been gifted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so there are some rules and there are some regulations, and there are some principles and guiding lessons that we can learn from the life of the Sahaba, radiallahu anhum, from the life of the Prophet and the Prophets, Anbiya alayhim salatu wassalam. And so we will have a course, a 14-week course designed specifically for that purpose. Inshallah ta'ala, we will open registration at the end of December. So I highly encourage everybody to sign up for that program, for that course. And also look at the website. Inshallah, within the next week, we'll have the full course listing of the spring semester. All of the 8 courses that will be offered, inshallah, in spring. And so registration begins at the end of December, but please do register quickly, because we don't want seats to fill up before you get an opportunity to sign up. And with that, I'm going to ask each one of the brothers of the panel to kind of share some of their personal experiences for about 5 to 7 minutes, inshallah. And then, okay, the sister's going to ask if they can write their questions out and pass them to the brother's side. Inshallah, there'll be someone collecting the questions. Then we can address those questions afterwards. So we're just going to spend a couple of minutes, inshallah ta'ala, listening to the stories of these brothers, and then I'm going to ask them a couple of questions myself, inshallah. And then also, Shaykh Rami, afterwards I'll ask him also to come up, so if you have any questions that you'd like to direct to him, that you can be asking him some questions as well. Jazakumullah khair.
Alhamdulillah, this is Rashad, and this brother over here, he is the means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used for me to become Muslim. It was his bayan, it was his talk, it was his tariq that made me decide that I wanted to be Muslim. This is part of Abdul Hamid. Yeah. So he was very instrumental. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used him as a means for me to come to Deen. So I guess if you have any questions or me first? Okay, so first I kind of gave my bio. I accepted Islam in the late 70s, early 80s. I was incarcerated, and when I decided to become Muslim, it was at a gathering where Talib was the Imam. He was the resident Imam. In other words, he was incarcerated also. And the thing most that I remember from his talk was he was talking about cigarettes. I don't remember the whole thing, but I remember this part, and this is what made me become Muslim. He said that if you want to stop smoking, you have to do just that, stop smoking. If you take a drag off somebody else's cigarette, that's what we call it, a drag or a bump, or you cut down on the quantity that you're smoking, in essence, you're still a smoker. The only way that you can stop smoking is you have to go to bed a smoker and wake up a non-smoker. And so that did something to me that I related to Islam. I have to go to sleep as a gangbanger, and when I wake up, I'm going to wake up Muslim. And that's how it happened for me overnight. As we say, I just flipped the script. So everything that I learned from the streets and all that, I turned that over to Islam. So as serious as I was carrying it in the streets, that's how I'm serious that I'm carrying in Islam. The way I show my colors in the street is how I show my colors in Islam. So I put the turban on, and I actually, first time I put the turban on, I was incarcerated down in southern Illinois in a place called Vienna. A fellow from he was a Moor, we call them Moors, from the Moor Science Temple. And he used to wear a turban, and he showed me how to wrap the turban. We incarcerated, went in jail with the penitentiary. I was sentenced, sent down to the penitentiary, and he's wearing a turban. So I asked him to show me how to wear the turban, and that's why I got my penchant, my urge, my love for the turban inside the penitentiary. Then when I came home, I got involved in the effort of Dawah and Tabligh, and then my Shaykh, Abu Bakr, he showed me how to wrap the turban, and this is how I wrap my turban. Now everybody compliments me on my turban, how I wear it. Well, we're known all over America for the Abu Bakr wrap. This is the Abu Bakr wrap. So that's basically it for me.
Did Umar Shaheed also do that?
Yeah, Umar Shaheed, yeah.
Yeah, he had the same thing, right?
Same thing. Umar Shaheed is a brother that's incarcerated. He's been incarcerated for a while, maybe 10-something years. Since his incarceration, he has become alim, and he's become hafiz. And he's in a mental institution. He's on his meds. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed him where he has become alim and hafiz of Quran, incarcerated. He walks around the institution, turban, jalabiyah. He speaks fluent Arabic, writes fluent Arabic. He couldn't do none of this on the street. But he has some of the best teachers. So inshallah, and he's from Masjid Dawah. May Allah subhanahu talk about it? Oh, I became a chaplain by the way of I go into the institutions under the Muslim American Dawah Association. The Muslim American Dawah Association is an organization that actually was founded by the War of the Muhammad back in the 60s. Actually, the only Islam among Americans, well, the only Islam that initially was in the jail was initially from the Nation of Islam. And then after the death of Elijah Muhammad in 1975, when War of the Muhammad, may Allah put him in his grave, came into the leadership, then he tried to bring the brothers into mainstream Islam. So you have two types. You have the Nation of Islam and real Islam as introduced by War of the Muhammad and his imams. So when I accepted Islam in the penitentiary, that's what I came in under the teachings of War of the Muhammad into mainstream Islam. I never was with the Nation of Islam. And so when I came home, I think it was in the 90s, in the early 90s, I was working for Chicago Board of Education. I was a wrestling coach and security officer, wearing full sunnah, dressed just like this. I came to work with turban. As a matter of fact, for my interview, I had everything but my staff. I had my turban wrapped in a way, because I had got it from the brothers on the West Coast where it was like a veil. So I dropped a couple of loops and I had the veil on. This is why I went for a job interview for Chicago Board of Education. And we didn't even talk about pay. The first question I asked him, did I have to change my garb? He said, well, if you don't have any problem with the children making fun of you, he gave me my letter, told me to go down 39th Street, take my fingerprints, and then they hired me. During my tenure there, taught at Dawah. Now, this may be, 15 years or so after I accepted Islam. He came up to the school and he encouraged me to get involved into the jail work. And I said, okay. Little did I know what he was doing. He was training me, because what he did was, when I came in, he came out. So initially I got the 2 divisions that he was facilitating services in. The division that I accepted that decided where I was going to accept Islam at Division 6 and Division 9, which is the maximum security division there. And in 2003, the outgoing Imam of the Muslim American Dawah Association, they selected me to be the responsible person for the Muslim American Dawah Association. This is what we go in under in the jail. So since 2003, I have been the Imam, the chaplain, and in the county jail, not on the state level, not on the federal, but the county jail. So since 2003, I've been the Imam of the Muslim American Dawah Association. And understand now, this is a unpaid position. I'm contracted for 20 hours a week, part-time job. I'm contracted for 20 hours a week to facilitate services or to make sure that the Islamic program is going on and up and running in the county jail, and I don't get no pay. And I've been doing, except from Allah, which is the best pay. And I've been doing it consistently for 17 years. And inshallah, I'll do a 17 more, inshallah. So that's basically it for me.
My situation is varies totally different from Brother Khalid, Brother Taba. They're more modest than me. As Shaykh Rami say, I'm one of them guys, the Sahaba. You know what I'm saying? I'm one of them guys. Alhamdulillah. The reality for me is coming into the deen is by Allah's decree. What's up? Okay. It's by Allah's decree. As Brother Khalid said, I was part of a street tribe. And in reality, what I really want to press upon is that we don't get this twisted. Because we talking like, you know what I'm saying, the brothers that's inside, predominantly like the Shaykh say, African Americans, or I like to say ethnic minorities, relative to the reality of an ethnic minority within the majority country. But to bring it all home to all y'all here, and most of y'all Indo-Pak, is the reality that the situation here is no different from the situation that created Pakistan in 1947, 1948. We are all still under the occupation, as the Rasulullah said, narrating the hadith of the Arab defeating the Ummah and dividing us up as if they have nothing better to do than sit at the table and divide it up. And to sit us at a situation where we start looking at each other differently and not bonded by the Aqidah like we're supposed to be, not understanding the fitna that we're enduring, the oppression that we're doing, we all suffer. As the Rasulullah says, one part of the body hurts, the entire body hurts. We're not feeling that. We way away from that. We have to get that back. When you talk about Taba, Shaykh, that's what the brothers say, I understand Taba. Because when we come into the deen, we don't come to the deen to be good citizens. We come to the deen to understand what it is to be a good man, a good human being, to give back to mankind. Okay, that's Taba for us. It don't stop until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take our soul. Now, my reality coming to the deen came from the opposition. There was an ayat in Surah Al-Ram that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, truly you was enemies one to another, the brick in the pit of the fire. Without he died until I gave it to you. My situation was, I was an insane gangster disciple. I went down for 2 counts of attempted murder. Okay? So the reality, when I started saying I was going to go home, how was I going to go home? Was I going to go home the same way I came in? Or was I going to be different? Matter of fact, the Shaykh can probably say to the brothers sitting up here, you scared because you have no idea what you're going to do when you go home. It's way beyond getting a job. It's about who are you? What's your identity? What's your purpose? Real talk. If 3 questions come, what came before your existence? What's the purpose of your existence? And what after you comes after you cease to exist? These are 3 very fundamental questions nobody thinks about, and especially in the land we're sitting in right now called America. So in short, I know I'm trying to keep this short, but I was through in this because I was only coming to support Khalid, not sit on no panel. But to keep it short, when I'm saying to make it really home, because what Shaykh Rami made mention, he was talking about the white brother. There's also another situation because we come street tribes in Chicago. There was very seldom that street tribes in my generation would intermingle with each other. If you intermingle with another street tribe, that's like being complicit with working with the enemy. At that time, the street tribes that were the avid enemy of me were those who was mostly described to Islam. They were called Blackstones, Vice Lords, whatever the case may be, but they used principles of Islam in order to organize themselves. I was the opposite of that. You know what I'm saying? We was the ones under the so-called Jewish 6-point stop. Look at the scenario. The symbol, half moon, 5-point, Islam, right? The 6-point, the Yahoo. And they fighting each other. What a hell of a game. Yeah, it's a hell of a game. I ain't gonna get too deep. So the reality for me is when I started seeking what was my purpose, what do I belong to, how do I fit into the scheme of things, there was one brother that was my, it seemed to be my adversary, was talking to me about the Rasul Salam because I was coming in from yard and I ain't never seen people make salat like I saw people make salat. I was captivated. I was like, man, who put their heads on the ground like that and do that? You know what I'm saying? So when I talked to my man, I said, man, what's that? What was that you on? I knew about the Nation of Islam, as he said, Elijah Muhammad, Marcus God, all these things, because I was politicized before I became Muslim. So when I saw that, I was like, wow, you know, that's deep, that it really impacted me. So I went and hollered at my man. He started telling me about the Rasulullah Sallallahu. So I was like, man, he sound like a gangster. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to keep it 100 with y'all, like the Shaykh say. When he started telling me and gave me a book of the Sirah, and I was like, subhanallah. Man, you can steal, clown, and do this, and you get the reward of Jannah? I got to get with this. You know what I'm saying? So the reality is that brought about a balance, okay? Because in this society, especially being from the reality of being domesticated and brought over here, because y'all brothers really, truly got to understand, your family's probably migrated over here. The reality of me, and I'm not full African-American. Y'all can look at that and see that. I'm mixed, real talk. So now we're talking about a hell of an identity construct going up in the African-American community saying I'm black. You dig what I'm saying? So in order for me to prove I'm black, I had to do some very vicious things to be accepted, which was going to try to practice for my fitna. So the point I'm getting to is, when you have been taken away from your culture, your language, and your ilm, and I'm really trying to make emphasis, when these brothers take Shahada by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's lead, it ain't no choice. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answering the dua of the ancestors that had to come at the bottom of them slave ships, looking for some relief. Now, alhamdulillah, the relief is came and he died. Now what we going to do? Are we going to be paid homage to our ancestors by standing on this deen, or are we going to still stay in a humiliating situation by just being ritualistic and, how you say, giving rhetoric in our presentation? Because this takes certainty, yaqeen. Without it, you ain't going to move on nothing. So in short, when I did that and I learned about that, I taught myself how to make salat through a pamphlet that I got from my man, Shaykh Ahmed Dida. Because when I was in there, wasn't nobody getting Dawah, only Shaykh Ahmed Dida. And so I was writing South Africa. And he was responding, alhamdulillah. You know what I'm saying? So the reality from that goes deeper. So I taught myself, gave myself Shahada, because it was only me, and moved on that. And when I, you know what I'm saying, did eventually come out into the population, because I was in segregation. Segregation means you locked up, pretty much 24 hours a day, period. You know what I'm saying? So that was what I was on. So that was the reality for me. And so when I did that and came home, alhamdulillah, you have perimeters. Because one thing, again, that once you have been stripped of your humanity, you have no really perimeters. You act as in the capacity of an animal. And you accept that as a culture. This is something that's passed on from your father to your mother, so forth and so on. Because again, you don't know what Hidayah is. You don't know what God is. Your God is only given to you by your what? Master. And that master still exists for all of us in this room. Do not get it twisted. So I'm gonna tone it down, and I can go further with it if people like. My point is, I also started an outreach program because I saw a vacuum that needed to be filled, because there's certain entities going in, and yeah, they are teaching Islam, but they're not teaching it in the capacity where Islam, the Quran, and the Sunnah is relevant to time, place, and people. That's very important. That's like me going to Pakistan and not knowing the reality of the culture, or so from so on. I'm just sitting out. I'm like a needle in a haystack. I don't know what's going on. That's the same thing sometimes with you brothers here. You don't know the reality, the history of the African American. All you know is what was given to you by the propaganda that comes through. And if you don't really study the history of the people, you'll never be able to appreciate the people. where I can get down and know about Pakistan because I studied radical because y'all my brothers. That's what bonds us, this Islamic Aqidah. So inshallah ta'ala, you know, whatever question I will ask y'all to forgive me. Khalid do this on me, you know what I'm saying? And I'm gonna pass it Brother Talib. In a really situation, Brother Talib, alhamdulillah, Talib always told me since he met me, so I know Talib since I was 27 years old. Well, Shah, you gonna have a heart attack. You too intense. But guess what? Ain't nothing wrong with striving for peace and be Allah. Allah Akbar.
I wanted to clarify something. You know, it's been mentioned a few times that if you were incarcerated, you could relate to Yusuf, alayhi salam. See, if you were innocent, you could relate to Yusuf. See, you know, let's not get that twisted. See, just being incarcerated, you know, and for a crime you committed, you know, that's different. That's a totally different ball game from Yusuf alayhi salam. See, should let that sink in. You see, and I'm one of those who can relate to Yusuf. Okay, I was locked up and I was innocent. Totally different ball game. 2 years locked up for armed robbery murder that I knew nothing about. Knew nothing about, no involvement with it, knew nothing about it. But in my 62 years, that was the best time I ever had. That was the best thing that ever happened to me. Being locked up for a crime, an armed robbery murder that I had nothing to do with it, didn't know anything about. But that's what Allah Ta'ala used to get my attention. That's what he used to get my attention. While I was locked up, I heard two brothers were talking. And one of the brothers who was, recently made the transition, what we call the transition from the Nation of Islam to true Islam. Okay. And he was telling this brother, he said, no, Elijah Muhammad, he was not the last messenger of Allah. He said that was a falsehood. Now, you know, ordinarily, you know, that type of conversation was furthest thing in my mind. That didn't, you know, that wouldn't have never interested me. But I know that I used to hear on the radio certain advertisements when the Nation of Islam was going to be at, like, for example, Medina Temple. This was back in the 60s. I used to hear these advertisements on the radio. Come here, Elijah Muhammad, the Nation of Islam, right? So that's what got my attention. And the brother who was speaking, you know, he made his transition from the Nation of Islam to true Islam. And he was the first one I heard, you know, speak on the greatness of Allah. He spoke on the greatness of Allah, you know. And he didn't know Al-Fatiha. He told me that the prayer of the Nation of Islam was, he called it the Abraham prayer. That's what he called it, the Abraham prayer. Where he says, surely I've turned myself to thee, O Allah, the originator of the heavens and earth, and surely I'm not of the polytheists. You know, that was the prayer they said in the Nation of Islam. So he taught me this prayer. And that's all I knew, okay? But to make a long story short, I want to mention how you know it's very important that we keep our minds, you know, uncluttered with nonsense, you know, because Allah continuously shows us, try to show us signs, send us signs. And if our mind is cluttered like a blackboard, you continue to write on the blackboard, and you don't erase it, so it gets cluttered. And then to the point where you can't get anything else on you can't write anything else on the floor, on the blackboard. So likewise, our mind is the same way. You know, you can have your mind cluttered with nonsense, and so on that. and you miss the signs of Allah. And so I had a public defender, right? And the judge I had was known to be a racist. His name was Mahala. Okay, so when my attorney came to visit me once, you know, I told him I'd like to get a change of venue, have my case brought before another judge. Okay, and brothers, there was a judge at that time. His name was we were aware of. His name was Judge R. Eugene Pension. And he was known to be a law judge, right? So when I was telling my attorney that I'd like to get a change of venue, in my mind, I was saying to myself, I sure would like to get Judge R. Eugene Pension to hear my case. So when my attorney returned to me sometime later, and he told me that I got to change the venue, and it was before Judge R. Eugene Pension, I took that as a sign, you know, that I'm about to get out of here, okay? Now, you know, during the course, I must have accepted Islam maybe the first 3 months I was locked up. And I was locked up 22 months, to be exact. And, you know, as someone mentioned how the guards and the other inmates, the respect they give Muslims, you know, I've never received so much respect, that type of respect from the guards, the gang bangers, the chiefs of the gangs, you know, and you know, it had reached a point where it no longer even mattered if I was going to be found guilty or not. It didn't matter anymore, okay, because I knew that I was innocent, and when I became Muslim, I understood clearly that Allah Ta'ala knew I was innocent. Okay, He knew I was innocent, and I would often say, and when I was giving dawah to people, I would say that if Allah allows me to be convicted for a crime I didn't commit, it's got to be a profound reason for that. And I would just say sometimes, you know, maybe He would want me to be convicted, sent to the joint, and maybe there's one particular brother He wanted me to reach. One particular brother He wanted me to reach, and then He began to open doors for me, and I'd get out on an appeal or something, you know, or I just stayed in there. But the point is, it didn't matter, you know. You know, just like, and I reflected in the story of Yusuf. You see, the story of Yusuf, it meant a great deal to me. See, I was one of those who knew what he felt like. You see, if you were locked up and you were guilty, don't get it twisted. You don't know it. You can't feel, you can't understand what Yusuf experienced. So don't get it twisted. You have no idea what Yusuf was experiencing if you were locked up and you committed that armed robbery. Yes, sir. You committed that murder. You understand? You were guilty. Yusuf was innocent. Yusuf was innocent. So I'm one of those who can relate to what Yusuf was experiencing. You know what I'm saying? They're not the same. It's not the same. It's not the same at all. You know. So please let that sink in. You know. And so anyway, they elected me as, you know, the brothers from the streets used to come in and give the dawah from Imam Muhammad's community, right? And that's the community I became a part of, okay? And the brothers selected me as their resident imam because, you know, I was one of those brothers that when I accepted Islam, I couldn't keep my mouth closed. I want to give everybody dawah. I couldn't be quiet, you know. And I had a wonderful time, you know. I mean the tall respect that I received from the staff, you know, from the guards, the inmates, you know. It was once I had a cellie, and he was a Caucasian, he was a white boy, right? And he was a drug addict, you know. His name was Louis Pinozo, I never forget his name. And one day we were in the day room. I was sitting watching the news, and one of the chiefs of the gangsters up there, his name was Booney Black. His name was Booney Black. Okay, and he was sitting over here, and I was sitting over here, and one of his people was sitting over here, and we watching the news. So this guy got up, all right, and left, and Louis Pinozo came and sat there. Now keep in mind, I've been giving Louis Pinozo dawa. He's my cellie, right? So the guy came back and told Louis Pinozo, he said, "You in my seat, man." Louis Pinozo, I've been sitting there for the longest. I've been sitting here, and he had, the guy had been gone, you know. So he said, "Man, this is my seat. Get up out of my seat. This is one of these gangsters now, all right?" And Louis Pinozo, he's standing his ground. He said, "No, I was sitting here." And then he looks at me. Louis Pinozo looks at me as if to say, "Now wait a minute. Now all this dawa you've been giving, you know I'm right, okay?" And he said, that's just what his expression is saying, you know. And so I said, "Brother, you know, he was sitting. He's been sitting there, you know." And the brother said to me, the gangster said to me, he said, "Hey, brother, you know, you really should stay out of this, you know." Before I could say anything else, Booney Black said to this man, he said, "Man, get up out that seat. That's that man's seat. Get that man his seat." You know, so, no, I'm sorry. He said, "Leave that man alone. Leave that man alone. That man been sitting there. Leave him alone." So I didn't have to say another word. And it was peace on the deck. Booney Black told him, "Leave that man alone." Okay? So that was justice, you know, and I didn't have to say a word. I didn't have to say a word after that, you know. So, you know, I was finally, you know, I went to a trial. I had a bench trial because one of the reasons I wanted to have Judge R. Eugene Pincham as my judge, because he was known to be a law judge. He was known to judge your case by the law, okay? And at the trial, I didn't have to open my mouth. I didn't have to say a word. And I had you may not believe this, but I had two eyewitnesses. I had two eyewitnesses pointing the finger at me, saying that I was one of the trigger men in an armed robbery murder. And one of the reasons they were able to make it stick is because one of the witnesses was my brother-in-law. Okay, one of the witnesses was my brother-in-law, and he did this to me because out of revenge. I had done something to him, and he told me he was gonna get me back. He said, "I'm gonna get you back for that, man. I'm gonna get you back." And that's how he got me back. He gave me he told the police that he knew one of the trigger men, one of the men on this armed robbery murder, and the police just believed him and came and arrested me. You know, that's how it is in the African American community, y'all. They believed him, you know. And not only that, get this. They believed him while he was locked up for killing his girlfriend. Let me tell you what this crank did. He took his girlfriend in an abandoned building, poured gasoline on her, and beat her to death with a piece of radiator. Walked out of the police station. Walked out of the abandoned building, went to the police station, and turned himself in. And this is who they listened to. when he told them that he knew one of the men in the armed robbery of the armed robbery stick up, the armed robbery murder, and you know, he came up in the county jail. He happened to come up on the same tier I was on, and so when I confronted him, he said, "Oh no, brother, they lied." He said, "They lying." He said, "I know." Now he was on parole. He said, "I know I'm going back to the penitentiary." He said, "I need you on the outside. You can't do anything. You can't help me if you're in here with me." He said, "Whenever your trial is, whenever you go to trial, you know, just have them to call me." They lying. So a month or so later, he got transferred off the tier. Make a long story short. During the trial, he had one of his friends to also say I was one of the trigger men. My brother-in-law, when he was asked in the courtroom, did he see the trigger man in this armed robbery murder, he stood up, pointed at me, and said, "Yeah, that's him. That's him right there. I've been knowing him all my life. He married my sister. Don't you think I know him when I see him? That's him right there." That's what he said to me. That's what he said about me. But after the trial, Judge R. Eugene Pension, he called the mother of the deceased guy who was killed. He called her up to the bench. He said, "Ma'am, I want to offer my condolences for your loss." He said, "But you heard the trial." He said, "I didn't believe one word. I didn't believe one word of either witness. Not one word. And I have no alternative but to find this man not guilty." I didn't have to say a word. But it was time for me to go because my time there had been, the purpose had been served. The purpose had been served. That was the best thing ever happened to me. Okay, Allah Ta'ala knew that this is what it was going to take to get my attention. Okay, this is what it was going to take, and so I began to give the Dawah in 86. Imam Bashir at the time, he got me going into giving the Dawah in the Cook County Department of Corrections, and I did that for 12 years, and it was on a volunteer basis, but I considered it as a job. It was very serious to me, so much so that when I got acquainted with some of the guards, that if for whatever reason I wasn't able to be there, I would call the guards and have them to go up on the deck to notify those brothers that I wouldn't be coming, because I clearly know what it felt like when you Muslim and brothers coming in from the outside. I mean, you anticipate going to that service, and when the brothers don't show up, for whatever reason, they don't show up, that's a huge letdown. That's a huge letdown for them brothers. Them brothers when it's time to go down for the service, them brothers be at the deck, be at the door with their Quran in their arm, waiting for the call. So just imagine that. They wait, it's 7 o'clock, they know that this is the time for the service, they're at the deck waiting, they're at the door waiting. And for whatever reason, you don't show up, just imagine. That's a huge letdown. So I should make it my business to speak to get acquainted with particular officers, because you got friends of the Muslims. Some of those officers are friends of the Muslims. You know what I'm saying? They'll help you. They go out their way to help you. You know what I'm saying? So I could go on and on, but also I came in just to give college support. I wasn't going to be on the board on this panel. You understand what I'm saying? Either. But this is serious work, brothers. This is serious work. And Khalid may not remember, but how he actually got started. Masjid al-Rahman was on Division back in Division Street back in 1995, and I gave a talk. And in that talk, I mentioned that there are brothers who come out of the from being incarcerated, and their attitude is, I ain't going back for nothing. I don't want to go back for nothing. And I said, I mentioned, I didn't understand that. How you be incarcerated as a Muslim, know what that experience is like, but not be willing to go back and give dawah. And after that talk, Khalid called me and said, Talib, I felt like you was talking directly to me. He said, I want to get involved. You remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
And that's how he got involved. He said, I feel like you were talking directly to me. And he's been involved ever since. So maybe if you have any questions, you might want to, we have a few minutes, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
In lieu of time, we'll take just a few questions, direct questions from the audience, inshallah, and then we'll finish up. We will have some time for refreshments, so if the brothers want to interact one-on-one with some of the brothers in the panel, or Shaykh Rami, you please take that opportunity. We do have refreshments immediately afterwards, but we try to stick to the schedule and finish by 10 o'clock. So if you have any quick questions anyone wants to ask, please feel free to do so, and then mention who you're going to direct it to, inshallah, as well. Yes.
It's for everyone.
I'll repeat it, inshallah. Oh, for everyone?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
What do you guys do about alarm clocks in prisons, like when you go to sleep?
Alarm clocks?
Yeah.
The question was about alarm clocks.
You mean for getting up for Fajr?
Yeah.
Oh, for getting up for Fajr, for the Salat times.
Oh, when you locked up.
You can leave this one. You can just go.
I don't know about anybody else, but when you locked up, you don't need no alarm clock. You're up. I mean, did y'all have that experience?
Oh man.
You don't need no clock. You don't need no clock. You up. So that. You know the question? No, you don't need the clock.
Education, general education.
This is for the Shaykh. This is for you. This is a good answer for your organization.
The question is, thank you for coming to the Windy City. Taba Foundation provides Islamic education for inmates, but is there a GED basic education for those individuals who don't have a high school education? The reality is a lot of people in there don't have a high school education, and part of their rehabilitation is education regardless of what it is. We looked into that, but we found basically that most prisons already provide that. Most prisons and jails already provide that because they recognize that that's part of their rehabilitation. So we at Taba Foundation, one of the things that we do is we don't want to reinvent the wheel. And that's one of the reasons why we're here and networked with brothers that have been doing this since before I was born. But also recognize that in the institutions they have HVAC classes, welding classes, job training. People can get a lot of job training and their GED, and in some cases their college degrees, AA degrees, and so forth. So what we do is we encourage our students to do that. So it's already there, and it's part of one of the recommendations, strong recommendations that we have for our students.
Yeah, you mentioned Brother Omar Shahid, and I had an opportunity to spend some time with him when he's at the Mental Institute, and he's actually currently pursuing a bachelor's in a field, and at the same time learning Arabic. And it's incredible that the opportunities that exist despite all those conditions. And I would venture to say, Allah alam bisawab, but some of these brothers in the system, I mean, when they come out, like, let me just say that at first I would go to help him learn Arabic, and then eventually I was going to learn from him about Iman. And he would bring me to tears sometimes, things that he used to say. And I would just say, I can imagine that this brother, with all that knowledge and half of the Quran, just speak to the people, how much effect would he have, speaking from the heart? And that's actually something that I've felt as a challenge, is that each individual person in the system, they need personal guidance as to what education should they pursue, what's required first. And it's not as easy as just giving a curriculum to everybody and you follow the same system. Because I don't know his background before going in, but he did have some Islamic education and background. He was born a Muslim. And so his situation was different. And he, alhamdulillah, you know, it's amazing, in the system, he calls regularly Maulana Abdullah Salim, you know, Shaykh Hussein. He calls me all the time. He is in such contact all the time. He's calling. And it's just amazing how much talab that they have. And it really brings people like myself to shame that there's so much talab in that confined condition. You know, what should be the demand for people who have the capacity to do it without any restrictions?
Okay, question, Jazakallah, for your information, for your informative presentation. Are there opportunities for women to serve as chaplains in the female prisons? I go into the jailhouse. I would think that there would be. We have a lack of female participation. I know on the jail level. It would really be a challenge on the state level, on the prison level. But that's something that because they have a variety of women institutions here in Illinois, and they constantly open up new ones every year. You'd be surprised at the rate the females are being incarcerated, and the length of time that they are given to women. And but that's something that I'll check into on the prison level. But on the jail, we have a shortage of sisters going in. We need sisters going in to talk to the females in the county jail. So that's how that is.
Can I speak on that point?
Sorry, what I want to speak on, I guess I want to take that higher when you talk about the females, because a lot of times they are underutilized greatly. And this is a great, I always want to say hindrance, because the first teacher anybody is the mother, the But I go back to the Surah of the Rasulullah when we see the support of the woman. A lot of people say about Khadija, but Khadija did a great thing by supporting Rasulullah holistically by Allah's decree. But not just that. When the campaigns, I remember it was, I think Khalid ibn Walid, when I think he retreated from it, I could be corrected, from the asset of the Romans, he had to retreat and they came back. The first thing the women did was start throwing stones at them and calling them cowards because they were fearful. We don't have that being indoctrinated into the husbands or the children. So when we talk about trying to educate women inside, first and foremost, I think somebody mentioned training. Training has to be done. Everybody can't do dawah, man. This ain't about, I'm a Muslim, I can do dawah. No, that's why it's a specific called da'is, and da'is must be trained. That goes for the sisters as well as the brothers, because this is a very serious matter when you talk about somebody's doing it as well as their akira. This is not a religion, this is a deen, this is a holistic way of life that has to have balance to it. So anytime somebody's seeking, be it to females or to males, make sure, inshallah ta'ala, you understand the responsibility that you will be held accountable to in this life as well as the akhirah. Because I think you mentioned it, brother, you know, with the people get the better cause for giving it, but you also get another responsibility too. You also get the what? The weight. Just like all of us are imams of the house. When we raised up, the imam of the house is going to be questioned. All of us are going to be raised behind the imam. So this is not a lackadaisical thing. I don't want anybody in this room to take this lightly. This is a war for our souls and our minds. What we going to do?
I knew that question was coming about the sisters, because every time I give the presentation, it always comes up, what about the sisters? And just like Imam Khalid was mentioning, the sisters have a lot less access to people than the brothers. The brothers have a serious lack of access, but the sisters in the prison have even less access to education. Just to give you an idea, there's a state women's prison in California, and there's an imam, or not imam, he does a lot of work. Dr. Rajab Ali, you know, I think you know. He does a lot of work in prison as a prison chaplain, volunteer. And he went to a Muslim women's prison one time, and I know there's children in the room, so I'm going to use a few code words, but you understand the gist. This girl was abused by her father in the worst type of way. You can imagine what I'm saying. From the time she was 9 years old till the time she was 14 years old. At 14, she made the decision, my father's never going to do that to me again. So she took a knife. She told her father, you're not going to do that again. He kicked her out of the house. She ended up on a life on the streets, selling herself, and having a manager. I'm not going to use the street name for the manager, but having a manager. She ended up in prison. She took her shahada in prison. And she said, when she got out for serving her term, who was there to pick her up? It wasn't the Muslim community. It was her manager from before Islam. And she's a Muslimah. And what is she going to go back into her life? So that's an extreme example, but it's a real example of the lack of access that the sisters have in the system. Also, another thing, a thing to point out, there's another women's prison where I'm in contact with. We do some training with the chaplain that's there, and he said that 80% of the ladies in that prison were abused in that horrible way, abused as children, most probably by their family. 80%, and they end up in prison. So whenever anybody criticizes the Muslim community about we're so oppressive to our women because of wearing hijab or this or that or the other, to say, look at your own statistics. And before you go pointing the moral finger at our community, look at your community. But the reason I want to mention that about there are those women prisons, and we do need sisters that are trained to go in there as volunteer chaplains and to give that access. So it's a big area that needs work.
Just to add one more thing to the women, it would be good if you could participate with your husband. It's good for them to see a balanced life, and plus there will be some restrictions or limitations with in the women's unit. And so it would be good if you and your husband or your brother or even your father could participate with you. Just for it just be best that way.
I had like maybe a closing question. Being from
Just to follow up, does Taba provide some training for the sisters?
The question is, does Taba provide training for the sisters? There's already, just as I mentioned, there's people that have already been doing this dawah work before we established ourselves as a nonprofit. People like Imam Khalid, Imam Bilal, brothers. And there's also sisters. In our community, specifically, most of our work has been done locally, and there are some sisters in our community that are going to the women's, it's a federal facility. And so any of the sisters that are interested in working, we direct them to those people. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel here. There's a group of sisters already going in, volunteering. They know the whole system. Like Imam Bilal mentioned, it's important to tackle any issue of prison outreach in a very structured way, like going in with your husband or so forth. So there's a lot of things that they would have to learn. That's already been done. So we direct them to that aspect of our community.
I mean, one of the questions, I know it's kind of summing up just to wrap things up because of time. But one of the motivations for this program was to see what we can do practically and not just talk about it, but first of all, find out what's going on currently here in Illinois, and then based upon what's going on, because within the last 3 weeks in preparing this program, we've discovered that there are people we knew that there were, but we learned a lot more about rehabilitation programs, halfway houses. There's a lot of work going on. So maybe you can summarize briefly what's going on, and then also potentially what we can do to help participate ourselves.
Right now, at this particular moment, I'm collaborating with a couple of groups. One is a Christian group, and Master Dawah itself, they have purchased a building that, inshallah, that would be directed toward housing detainees, offenders coming home. And so there are a few things going on at Master Dawah, my local masjid, for the re-entry aspect. Imam, they have a program called Project Restore, where they're dealing with the housing aspect of it, of trying to help the re-entry of offenders when they come in. I know they have a few houses on the south side that have, their first house was very successful, and that they got funding from the city, and they're doing real good. So
Those are just what I know now. But keep in touch, inshallah. My number is on the flyer, and I'll try to find out more and try to assist you more if you need more information, inshallah.
Last question.
I have been involved 8 years going to DuPage County Jail, giving the Friday of Toba once a month. I can give you some information, with brothers who are interested to go. There is a organization by the name Just. And Nsour is in charge of this, and we do a orientation every 3 months, then you can register yourself. Having been involved for 8 years, I have trained myself how to do the dawa in the jail. Number one, that you need to know your deen first, that you have to have good knowledge of your deen. Number two, you need to have a good working knowledge about the Christianity, because when every 6 weeks or 8 weeks, an inmate takes shahada, and then the Christian people jump on him and they tell all sorts of bad things about Islam, and those prisoners, inmates come and talk to us. They say, they have talked to us about this, how do you counter this? So you need to know quite a bit of the Christianity. I'm sure that you people all know about Christianity. But I train myself to learn about Christianity. I can quote from the Bible extempore quite a few things that I can use for the dawa. So anybody who is interested, they can register through Just, in DuPage County. And so there are about 8 brothers. One of the brothers sitting here, that he is also involved going to prison. It is really a wonderful experience, uplifting experience that I feel when I go and talk to the inmates. I give the Friday sermon and I lead the Friday prayer once a month.
I know we're running late on time. I'd just like to mention one thing. It's the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ before I close with dua. But I was meaning to mention it, and Brother Rashad reminded me, because he said he gave himself the shahada. Right? Nobody brought him the shahada. And the Prophet ﷺ one day was talking to the Sahaba about his ikhwan. And he used the word ikhwan. And he was making dua about the ikhwan. And ikhwani, his brothers. And the Sahaba said, are those us? He said, no, you're my Sahaba. You're my companions, you're my Sahaba. My ikhwan are the people that are going to come after me. They've never seen me. They've never seen me or heard me. But they see me written, they see it written about me in scriptures, and they believe in me even though they've never seen me. Here is a living example of that. And there's probably other people. I don't know if your da'wah came through a person or through scripture.
Through a brother.
Through a brother. But even when we believe at one level, we're all in that, because who of us has seen the Prophet ﷺ in a way it can state at that time? Well, none of us are Sahaba. So we're all believing in him, even in the scripture. And there's one of our main student, Yusuf, he was in solitary confinement for 8 months. And he said the racism was so bad in the prison, he wanted to know what is the root of racism in America and the root of racism in the prison. He said it has to have its root in slavery. And he went back to studying the history of slavery. The history of slavery led him to West Africa. West Africa led him to what? Islam. He became Muslim in solitary confinement. No other human being around. Food slipped under a door. Books slipped under a door. He became Muslim on his own 3 months before he ever even met a Muslim. Just from seeing it written in a books. Now the other thing, like Imam Khalid was mentioning about the brother that's the Hafiz of the Quran walking around in the prison. And one thing that I like to have people imagine, we hear stories of the slave ships coming over from West Africa and packing the people in like sardines. You've seen those pictures? And then throwing so many of the bodies that deceased along the way to where the sharks got used to following those ships. Isn't that right? The sharks got used to following those ships because there was food to be thrown overboard. And there were many Muslims in those ships. There were also Christians in West Africa, probably, and there were animists. But regardless of what it is, the records show that the only thing that gave those people, imagine, stripped of their clothes, stripped of their land, stripped of their freedom, stripped of their human dignity, stripped of everything in the depths of those ships on a 3-4 month journey with people in just unsanitary conditions, people dying. You can imagine the despair that they felt in. They said the only thing
that gave them hope and gave them solace, do you know what it was? The Quran reciters. Could you imagine that in a ship on the transatlantic slave trade, and the moans and the groans and everything that's in that, the darks of those ships? But they were huffaz that they had taken from West Africa, and they were ulama that they couldn't strip. They could strip their freedom, strip their clothes, strip their dignity, strip everything, but they couldn't strip the Quran from their hearts. And so, in the depths of those ships, they were giving solace by hearing the Quran reciters, and that's what's happening in the prisons too. Because a lot of people that don't become Muslim, it's uplifting to see a Muslim, to see a human being walking with dignity when they've been living a life stripped of dignity. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from the people of Izzah. Allahumma Izzah al-Islam wa Izzah al-Muslimin. Allahumma wafiqna li-ittiba' al-sunnah. اللهم فهمنا القرآن اللهم فهمنا السنة اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه اللهم اجعلنا من المقيمين الصلاة اللهم اجعلنا من الذين يقيمون السنة اللهم فهمنا اللهم علمنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
One last really important announcement. Shaykh Rami is going to be here tomorrow as well. He'll have a program at Masjid al-Mustafa in Westmont starting at 11 a.m. on the rights of parents. It's a very important poem written by a Shaykh, Mauritanian Shaykh, you own Shaykh?
No, he's passed away about 100 years ago.
Okay.
He's my Shaykh, yeah. Yes,
you're Shaykh in a sense. It's been translated by Shaykh Rami, and then he's going to offer a dars on it tomorrow morning. And it's I can guarantee that you will not only enjoy it, you'll also learn a lot, even if you are a parent yourself. So the rights of parents, inshallah, 11 a.m. tomorrow, Masjid al-Mustafa, which is where the Dawah Hikmah courses take place tomorrow. And then afterwards, inshallah ta'ala, please make dua for us. We're trying to establish some type of program for the Illinois prison system through the collaboration of the brothers sitting here and others as well. Make dua that inshallah ta'ala that some fruits come from this journey, and that the brothers who are involved in the effort of da'wah, that Allah accept them, and that, by partaking in dua or making dua for them, that Allah also allow us to share in the reward of all the good that comes out of it. And Shaykh Rami then inshallah will be leaving in the evening tomorrow. So please also make dua for him for taking time out to come to Chicago, inshallah.
Just one more thing.
Brother Yusuf that I was telling you in the prison, he was somebody that a lot of people become Muslim on his hands, over 100 people in the prisons. And it's actually through his work and his interest in learning that got me interested in outreach. He's serving a life sentence, but he's coming up for parole this Wednesday at 8:30 in the morning, and he's well beyond rehabilitation. He has numerous rehabilitation courses. So I just ask everybody to sincerely make dua for Yusuf now, and especially on the night right before Wednesday, that they accept his parole. What's that? In Avenal State Prison in California, Yusuf Wiley. So just remember him by name, Yusuf Abbasi.
There will be refreshments, inshallah. Where are the refreshments going to be? In the back? Okay, so please do take some of the refreshments and then leave, inshallah. Before leaving, please do take some of that.
Yes.
Brothers, I'm sorry, excuse me, brothers, if I can get just a few minutes of your attention, I apologize. We actually had one more aspect of discussion. I wanted to let everyone know again, thank you so much for coming, Jazakallah khair. We wanted to thank ISNS and all the board members and everyone involved for allowing us to have our program here. And one thing I realized after looking at all of you in this workshop has been that you guys were empowered, and that was the goal of Darul Hikmah's workshop. So if you would like to continue seeing Darul Hikmah's workshops, such as this happen every month, then we hope that you can support us in every way possible. Number one, register. Register your email addresses in the front over there, and for the sisters in the back as well. Register your email address so we can continue to let you know about these types of programs. Number two, one thing that's very important is, in order for us to bring ulama and activists such as Shaykh Rami and many of the people that you see in front of you, we need your financial support as well. So you'll actually find in the front donation cards, recurring donation cards. So if you're able to support us, please donate $20 a month, and inshallah we hope to continue having these types of workshops and programs. And again, as Managing Director, I want to thank all of you, the board, our guests, our additional guests, everyone for coming. If you have an opportunity, then please, if you shed a tear, or if your heart was really affected at this time, come and give them a hug, shake their hands, and get to know them even more, inshallah.